So thanks for joining us, everyone, today. Just a quick rundown of the agenda. We're going to do some quick introductions, a quick overview of myself and our speaker, Maurizio Mancini, today. Quickly talk about Avant, and then we'll get into the presentation, which, as you all know, is an Agile Reboot in 100 days. So this is one organization's story. So it'll be an exciting journey about how an organization was able to reboot their Agile practices within as short as 100 days. Following that, we're going to hold a brief Q&A to address any questions that you folks may have. As you do have questions, feel free to drop them into the chat or the QA section. We will be monitoring them. And if we don't get to them throughout, we'll definitely have time saved at the end of the presentation to address any of those questions that you do have. And lastly, we'll close it off with a quick draw. So stay engaged and let's get ready to go. Thanks for joining us. Slide. So myself, I will be the host of the event today. My name is Ryan Hanna. I am the president and CEO of Avant. We are an Atlassian-based Atlassian solution partner with a headquarters in Winnipeg. I've been the president of Avant for just a little over a year now, but I've been with the company since back in 2013. Founded the Atlassian practice here at Avant. Day to day, I get to work very closely with our customers from early stages of projects through project completion. Been working daily with the Atlassian tools for over 10 years now and have earned my Atlassian certifications in both Jira Service Management and Jira Project Administration. Prior to working at Avant, I worked in large enterprise financial management roles, earning my Chartered Professional Accountant designation with a focus on business management and process improvement. And I enjoy spending time with my family at our cabin and playing guitar in spare time. And next up, we've got our presenter today, Maurizio Mancini. Maurizio is our managing consultant and principal lead of the Agile practice here at Avant. Maurizio is a leader in the quality and process industries with a sixth sense for Agile, quality, and business processes. He is best known for cutting through the noise and getting to the heart of any organizational problem, whether that problem consists of choosing the right software development processes, implementing modern quality approaches, or just finding the right balance between people, processes, and tools. Maurizio has been building teams for over 20 years and is known for building highly effective and dedicated teams. Maurizio's approach consists of empowering people and teams so that the team's talent and creativity come through naturally. This mindset favors the adoption of Agile values in any environment. Okay. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we are Avant. We are a IT consulting firm that specializes in people, process, and tools. On the tooling side, we are an Atlassian solution partner. And on the process side, as we indicated, we are Agile specialists, and we help organizations adopt both Agile processes along with the Atlassian tools that best serve those processes. As the slide indicates, we are proudly headquartered in Winnipeg, but we do have offices across the country and clients throughout both Canada, US, and internationally. We have a broad range of support services across the suite of tools, including license management, application admin, migration support, managed hosting, custom add-on development, and what we're really kind of here today talking about is the Agile space, so Agile training and Agile coaching, and blending these processes and incorporating with the tools in order to make sure you get the most value for your business. As I mentioned, we are Atlassian solution partners, so there is always a product element, not just the Atlassian products. We recognize that they aren't always the tools, but we are experts in these products, so we know how they best fit within your Agile processes. It is not just Agile that we focus on, though, however, as the Atlassian tools provide quite a broad range of solution areas including ITSM, asset management, facilities management, project and portfolio management, QA, test management, so on and so forth. So these are just some of the areas that we help businesses implement the Atlassian tools and integrate with other products, other tooling in order to support their business processes. Very quickly, as I mentioned, so we are a Canadian headquartered company, but we have customers throughout all of Canada and into the US and even international. So over the 10 plus years doing this, we've had the opportunity to work with some pretty amazing customers. Some of them shown here. And we've had the opportunity to both learn and grow with them. And it's been our pleasure throughout this journey. Next slide. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into the presentation, and I'm going to hand it over to Maurizio now.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. So good morning and good afternoon from wherever you're tuning in from. So I wanted to start off by reviewing the 5 common signs you may need in Agile Reboot. And as I go through them, just keep an eye on them and ask yourself whether your organization has these common signs. So the first sign, you have 3 to 4 times more projects than your teams can deliver. So the organization we're going to talk about today had 43 priority 1 projects and only had 22 teams to deliver them. Sign number 2, the teams are still early in the Agile journey. As we know, it is a journey, it does take time. But somehow we have the number of flavors of Agile that your organization is running is equal to the number of teams. Everyone seems to be doing their own thing. Sign number 3, you have what's called featureitis. So we like to call featureitis as teams that are just busy delivering small features. They don't really seem to have a cohesive vision for the product they're working on. And they're adding features because, well, you know, we're sprinting every 2 weeks, so we got to deliver something. So we like to call that featureitis. Sign number 4, you've already rolled out Agile at least 3 times in your organization, and it just doesn't seem to be delivering what you're expecting, right? So if you look throughout your organization, you'll see that people have their planning poker decks sitting on their desk, collecting dust right next to the big bound spirals of Agile training decks that they've had over the years. You know, but it just doesn't seem to be working, even though you've already launched it 3 times. And, you know, from that, it leads to, well, people are telling you, well, Agile just doesn't work. So people have lost interest in it. They've heard it before, and they're just saying it doesn't work. So these are the 5 common signs you need a reboot. So if you have seen any 1 or 2 or maybe all 5 of the signs, then chances are your organization needs an Agile reboot. So let me give you a bit of a context of the organization that we're talking about today. So this organization is what's called an ad exchange. Basically, they work on a software that helps to provide auction of advertising on websites. So you can imagine a big website like the New York Times has space where they show ads on their website. And this company basically auctions those spaces off for the New York Times for other companies to show their ads on the New York Times and drive traffic to their website. So this is a live auction that's done. It's done in real time, so people bid and win the spaces to show their advertising on the websites. So that's what an ad exchange is. This is a different platform, right? It's a large platform. They have 20,000 servers in the cloud to run this live auction. They have very high volumes. They do 100 billion requests per day, 3 trillion events per day as well. And they have 12 million lines of code. So it's not a small system. And really, it's only one product. There is only one ad exchange, but it has many small components. And an engineering team is their team is about 150 engineers in this team. So that's the context of the organization. That's their set. So let's start talking about how to kickstart a reboot. If you're going to plan a reboot, how do you go about kickstarting it? How do you get it ready? And we're going to give you 5 steps to think about in this section. So the first thing, you need that buy-in and understanding from the top. All right, so you need your C levels to buy into a reboot, or if you're starting from scratch an Agile transformation, it's the same thing. You need their buy-in. Now, what we often see is that the buy-in is easily given, but their understanding of what Agile is at the exec level is sometimes lacking. So it's easier to get the buy-in, but the understanding is even harder often. So you got to make sure that if your executives are signing up for Agile or an Agile reboot, they understand what they're committing the organization to. And more importantly, are your Agile leaders displaying their Agile mindset, or do they continue to work in the old way? So that's the step number one, is get that buy-in and understanding. Step number two, have clear business goals. Now, this seems to be a duh statement, but you'd be surprised how many organizations we work with where their business goals aren't clear. What are the strategic goals we're trying to hit? And there's usually 4 areas that become a problem in organizations that can't have clear business goals. So one of the areas is the market they're in. You know, it might be more of a dynamic market. Things are changing quickly. In COVID times, things have changed very, very quickly for many organizations. So the products they're working on sometimes are a little bit more nebulous, not as clear. So the teams are delivering features that are sometimes not connected to revenue streams or to margins to help deliver those strategic initiatives that our executives have set out for the organization. So having this clear idea of what features you need to deliver is essential in your business goals. From there, you know, try to take a mindset of delivering what's called the MVP, as we all know, the minimum viable product, and try to take that approach, right? We can try to deliver the perfect feature in our product, but it'll take forever. So in the true Agile spirit, we're going to deliver a smaller feature, get feedback, and use this incremental and iterative approach to get feedback from our users. And really, you're trying to do that so that your product evolves over time. So from there, there's also in the business goals, there's sometimes a lack of understanding of the capacity of your engineering team. So what does that mean? For this organization, they had 43 priority 1 large projects and only 22 teams to deliver it. So there was no true understanding of what the capacity of the team truly was. They were just piling up projects and hoping that things would just magically get delivered. So when you have an engineer, you know, that's multitasking on too many projects, you know, the productivity of that engineer suffers. And so when you have someone, you know, let's say you put someone on 5 projects, we know that the cost of context switching could be as high as 75%, which really leads to the next area of your business goals, right? Employee frustration and satisfaction. Again, if people are working on 5 projects, they really stop caring at some point. They really can't do anything. They don't have enough time to focus. So they stop caring and eventually they'll leave. And so you do want to have some clear goals and reduce that frustration for your employees so you can increase their satisfaction and keep your employees focused on delivering those MVPs that are connected to your larger vision. So these are the 4 key areas in terms of a business goals misunderstanding. That's the thing that you need to align in this kickstart. The next area is step number 3 in this reboot is a clear ownership and accountability. So if everyone's just busy doing stuff and not really connecting up to a higher purpose, so then no one's really accountable for what they're working on. So if we look at, again, overcommitment, right? We're putting people on too many projects. People don't know what the vision is. There's confusion and they're not too sure, you know, why am I overcommitted? I'm already working as hard as I can. It's not my problem. And that leads to the role confusion. You know, some people say, well, as an example, well, I thought the CTO sets the priorities for the engineering team. And the reality is no, the business or the product owners are the ones that should be setting the responsibility. And they are actually driving what the engineering team does. The engineering team just supports that business vision. So sometimes there's confusion, and that's what leads to this capacity misunderstanding. So a lot of it then leads to process confusion, right? So you have some product owners that are just throwing stuff into the backlog, and then they say, well, I didn't realize the team was going to deliver it. And then you ask them, well, you put it into the backlog and you actually prioritized it. So obviously they're going to deliver it. So there is some process confusion that happens. That always then leads to sometimes what's called accountability resistance. So you have some engineers that just want to work on, cool code and fancy stuff. They don't want to hear that they have to attend another planning meeting. So, they just want to work on stuff and they say, hey, I'm not accountable. I'm not in the planning, so leave me out of it. So you get a lot of this capacity misunderstanding, and you got to get this aligned if you're going to do any kind of a reboot. Next, you need an assessment, right? And we're going to talk about the assessment in a little bit more detail in a minute, but you need a strategic assessment as well as a tactical or a team assessment. And really, you can do an assessment on your own, but an independent firm that can come in and do the assessment for you is really essential, because it helps provide that outside voice that reaffirms what you may be seeing as a CTO or as a CIO. So we'll talk about the assessment in a second. And the last step in this kickstart is just get moving, right? At some point, you can get stuck in analysis paralysis. And so you just want to get moving on this reboot. They say that perfection is the enemy of getting it done. And that is true when it comes to a reboot as well. So if you have an organization that's about 150 people, you know more or less what everybody should be doing. So you need the momentum to make these transformations and reboots work. It's better to fail fast and remain in limbo. And if you're in a larger organization with thousands of people, then you say, well, I can't reboot the entire organization that quickly. Pick a division, pick a team, pick a proof of concept, and let's reboot that area. Let's learn from that area and then move on from there. So those are the 5 steps to kickstarting your reboot. So let's look at our roadmap and what we did with this one organization. So when I'm saying 100 days, it's 100 business days, because obviously we weren't making people work weekends. So in this 100-day roadmap, it looked a little like this. So month number 1 and 2 were focused on that strategic assessment that I mentioned, and making sure we understood from a strategic point of view where the organization was headed. I'll give you a little bit more details on that in a minute. In month number 3, we started the team assessments and completed them. We also started doing what's called Agile refreshers, more on that in a moment. And then from an executive level and management level, they held some meetings in month number 3. In month number 4, we finished off the refreshers, and we did the tool realignment. And I'll talk about the tool realignment in a second. And really, it was this time of the year, we were in the middle of this reboot. And so when we came back in January, we were ready to go. So we had realigned everybody, redid their tools, put people into new roles, rebuilt new teams, all within 100 business days. So we started in January, and then we went from there. And I'll show you some of the results in a few minutes. So on the strategic assessment side, just to give you a little insight into what we ended up finding and our approach to doing the strategic assessment. So we met with the CTO, we got his input, we knew what he was seeing. From there, we then met with key team members of the management team to get their perspective on the company's strategic direction. From there was an external firm that did a tech debt analysis of the code of the organization. And we also gathered the 1 to 3 year vision for where the company wanted to be as part of this strategic assessment. So some of the key findings that ended up coming out of for this one organization: 1, everything had been a priority. I've mentioned it before. They had 43 priority 1 projects, but no capacity to really deliver them. And how can you have 43 priority 1 projects? The other thing we found is people were playing Agile instead of being Agile. And so if you're in the Agile industry, you know what the difference is. Playing Agile is doing the mechanics of it, the ceremonies. Being Agile is really where the culture has changed and has really adopted Agile and is living Agile. So that's a very different approach. The tech debt analysis actually revealed that the level was actually reasonable. What was interesting of the finding here was that the developers were actually doing refactoring of the code unbeknownst to the product owner, because they couldn't get the product owner to understand the benefit of refactoring. So there was a misalignment between the product owners and the teams when it came to tech debt. And finally, their program and portfolio planning was really inadequate. There wasn't enough of it being done. And in that case, we introduced the executive portfolio Kanban in this case. There was other recommendations, but just to give you a sample. So once this was completed and recommendations were understood, we started the team assessment. And really, we wanted to see if there was a gap between what the executives were thinking and what the vision was up there, and really what the teams were thinking the vision was. And we wanted to see if this gap existed and how do we bridge that gap between the two. So in the team assessments, what we did was we interviewed more than 50 people across the organization in all kinds of roles, from directors, managers, team leads, team members. We used both one-on-ones and small group interviews. We then complemented that with a survey. We did a 31-question survey on 6 different dimensions, from everything about the Agile basics, the product ownership role, processes, all the way down to quality in the organization. And we finally completed the team assessments by attending some key team meetings. We had certain teams where we wanted to get a deeper understanding what was happening at the team level. And we also wanted to understand the product they were working on and some of the special challenges they might have been facing. So these team assessments revealed a number of positive patterns and anti-patterns. And as you'll see in the list, as you're looking at this list, again, look at your organization and see if you see some of these in your own organization. So think of yourself. So when we do assessments, we find it's important to do 2 things. One, we want to find the positive patterns. It's essential in our assessments that we look at that. It's essential to getting the buy-in if you're going to do a reboot. So people have been working hard on trying to make Agile work in your organization, and maybe they're facing different challenges that are out of their control. But you still want to acknowledge the good stuff that they've done to date, as well as you're pointing out, well, here are the opportunities on how we're going to take it to the next level. So in this organization, teamwork was great, self-organized teams, they were running 2-week release trains, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of good stuff that they had already done. Again, they had been trying to run Agile for 8 years in this organization. But we did find a lot of opportunities for improvement. And so before you see the entire list, remember that this list are very common anti-patterns found in many organizations. So when you see the list, I'm sure you'll see a lot of them that will resonate with you. So here was the list of the opportunities we discovered in this organization, a list of over, I think, 28 of them. And we provided recommendations on each of these things that we wanted to change and do to different methods. So we're not going to cover all of them in today's webinar. We're going to give you a bit of a sample on what we did in the 3 dimensions, right? On the people, the process, and the tools. On the people side, what we focused on is doing those Agile refreshers. Really, the people had their own ideas of what Agile is, what is Scrum, what is Kanban. Some people had been trained many years ago. Some had never done Agile. So we had people at different levels in this organization. So we really tried to do a bit of a reboot and saying, okay, we're going to level set everyone and give them a chance to get at the same level of understanding. So we offered 5 different types of sessions. Some people felt they just needed a short refresher. So that was the half a day. Some we did the full refresher, whole day. We actually held Scrum Master and Product Owner trainings. So we had new people that were going to be inserted into running Scrum Master for the first time. And we had people that had done Scrum Mastering but had forgotten some of the basics, as an example. And finally, we did a session called Being an Agile Leader, which we hold for managers, directors. We know that in the Agile world, sometimes the managers and directors feel a little lost in how they fit into the picture. So the goal of this session is really to help realign how their role changes in an Agile world and to make them understand that there is value in what they're bringing to the table. So really the refreshers were focused on getting back to the basics, fixing these misconceptions that people had, and ensuring everyone had the same foundation and there was a clear understanding on roles and responsibilities, because there was a lot of, again, misunderstandings on what's the product owner supposed to do, what's the team supposed to do, who's responsible for what. On the process side, again, number of recommendations, but I'm going to give you the most common one that we find in almost every organization. So the one we find whenever we look at the process is that people's backlogs are out of control. And you can probably look at your own backlog today. I'd bet you most of you would probably see anywhere from 200 to 300 issues in your backlog. Some of them have probably been sitting there older than 2 years. That's what happened in this organization. Every team we looked at had stuff that had been sitting there over 2 years. So what we recommend in this case is we recommend what's called a blind close. We literally tell them to pick a date, and anything older than that date, you're going to do a bulk close. So now a lot of people have some violent reactions to this recommendation. And really they say, well, one day we may get around to working on that feature or fixing that bug. And so look, if you're sitting in your backlog for more than X amount of time, whatever that magic time is, chances are you'll never get to it. And chances are it's stale and things have changed. So you might as well remove the noise out of the backlog so your team can actually focus on what they're delivering. So that's one of the key recommendations we made on that side. Then on the tools side, we'd try to look at tools when we look at an organization on where they are on the tool configuration spectrum, we like to call it. So on the left side, you have the out of the box. So, we've picked Jira, we didn't change anything. We're literally using it out of the box. And then on the other side, well, we picked Jira, but we've now done an extreme configuration to the point where it's out of control. And I'm sure that if you're sitting listening to this, a lot of you are probably on the right side. Jira is very configurable. So that's the power of Jira, but that is also the drawback of Jira, is that people think they can just do whatever. So it gets misconfigured to the point where, tools are being used improperly. The configuration is not optimal. So it starts to affect the effectiveness of the teams and the process. And that's exactly what happened in this organization. So what we did a deep tool intervention. We spent a bunch of time cleaning up their Jira, refactoring it, bringing it up to a level where it was much more usable and where it was not impeding the team's process and usage and deliverables that they had. We also then connected every Jira project to a Confluence wiki page. That seemed to be a concept that wasn't being used in this organization. And we also replaced their homegrown service desk with Jira Service Management. Finally, on the portfolio side, we tried to make the shift with this organization from projects to products. They had a very heavy outside tool. I won't mention which one it is, but we replaced the more complex portfolio management tool with something simpler like advanced roadmaps. And really just getting back to the basics, right? Not overcomplicating portfolio management, and let's just get good at it. All right, let's look at the results at this point, and then we'll get to some Q&A. So the results, this was after 10 months. So we did the reboot. We started in January. 10 months later, end of October, inside of the year we did it. This is what we saw. We're going to categorize it as the good, the bad, and the ugly. On the good side, what we saw within 10 months is that the organization was now completing 28 projects. That's more than double their output with fewer people. And it was really all through better planning, people remaining focused, and better use of the tools. It was as simple as that in how we managed to accomplish it. On the bad side, we still had the portfolio management that kept growing. So at the executive levels, projects kept piling in. The execs continued to struggle to prioritize things. So after 10 months, they were still struggling. We were trying to figure out how do these projects bring any value. So that did continue on. It did get better after the initial 10 months, but in the initial 10 months, this continued to be a bad area. And then on the staffing side, another thing that continued, we tried to improve it, but again, you don't change things overnight. People were still doing a bit too much context switching, but it did get better over time, but it did take time to get there. Initially, it did remain pretty bad. On the ugly side, the go-to marketing strategy just didn't exist. So what started to happen in this organization was the engineering team was always missing dates prior to the reboot. And then once the reboot happened, the engineering team was now hitting their dates. So what happened in a lot of cases is we developed new features, we had new products ready to go, went to the marketing team saying, okay, launch. And the marketing team was surprised. What do you mean? You actually hit your date? So they actually didn't have their go-to marketing strategy ready. So products sat on the shelf while they figured out how to get it out. And really prioritization was the other thing that remained a bit ugly. So again, it was, people that screamed the loudest got their priorities at the top of the prioritization list. So that remained pretty ugly in the early days, but again, got better as it went. So really the key takeaways for yourself today in this webinar. So we know that, transformation's hard, reboots are hard. We know that, right? But we also know that, people will say, well, we got to change stuff. But the people then say that love clinging to their broken processes. As much as it's broken, they'll say, no, I'd rather stick with what I know than what I don't know. So the greatest challenge in any transformation is changing that culture. And then once you change it, you got to make sure you stay on it constantly, right? So you do this reboot, don't think, well, it's done. We're done on this change. Change is a constant thing. And you got to make sure you remain diligent, right? Your coaches remain on it. Your scrum master remain diligent about your process, because people like slipping back to their bad habits. And the minute nobody's watching, they're going to go back to working the old way. And, look at, it does start from the top. So you got to get the executives to take that prioritization seriously so that it removes the noise getting to your teams. If you can get the top to figure out those priorities, it really doesn't help your teams. And finally, it's really a journey in Agile, right? Whether it's a reboot or a transformation, it is a long road. Some organizations take years to figure Agile out. Some never figure it out. So don't get discouraged in it. Sometimes it's just a question of a reboot to get you there. And that's really the story of this one organization. And now we're ready for a Q&A. So I'll take it back to you, Ryan.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Maurizio. All right, we're going to open it up to questions. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them into either the chat or into the Q&A panel. I'll take a look. There are a few that have come in. First off, do you have security built into your software?
So yes, there was security. I didn't touch on it in this webinar, but everything they were building in their product, security was an aspect of it. So DevSecOps, if that's what you're alluding to, was definitely a part of what they were working on.
Perfect. Hopefully that answers the question. And maybe perhaps do you want to touch on the security around the Atlassian products? Perhaps that's what this question might also be.
Sure.
As well.
Yeah. So in terms of that, I mean, when we went into it, they had multiple Jira administrators. That was part of the problem. There were too many chefs in the kitchen. So things got out of control because they had too many administrators. So we did lock it down, and we did have a process and tools team that we implemented. And then from there, we cleaned it up and put in some security into Jira and Confluence, and just got them to use more of a shared templates in creating projects, and just really following some basic Jira 101 administration rules. So we did put in some more security and locked it down somewhat.
Yeah, and just to add to that is, as with Atlassian products, there are 3 core deployment options: the legacy server products, data center products, and now the cloud products. We've really seen an evolution in the security capabilities within their suite of tools. On the server side, that responsibility has traditionally kind of gone to the sysadmin and the teams that are hosting and managing it. So we've seen some instances where those applications are running on a server under somebody's desk that has very poor security. More mature organizations that have very secure, very mature IT security processes in place will definitely have more security baked into how they manage their apps. But now with the Atlassian Cloud becoming the predominant source where organizations are residing, Atlassian's taking care of the security side. So that is, it's very helpful for many organizations who just don't have the expertise or the capacity in order to worry about those types of things. Okay, let's see if we've got any more questions here. Okay, we got one from Jamie. Is there a good way to differentiate whether you need a full reboot or if you need to take the next step and instead scale out what you have using one of the scaling methodologies?
That's a great question, Jamie. So let's, I guess, tackle this question because it's a multifaceted question. So I think I've seen too many organizations that say, well, we're trying Agile, we're a large organization, we have 20, 30, 40 teams, but things are just not gelling between the teams, right? So it's easy to say, I'm going to take and deploy SAFe in my organization because it's going to help align my teams. What I like to say is, before you make that decision, you don't want to add a heavy process like SAFe on top of quicksand. If your teams aren't getting the Agile basics, whether it's Scrum or Kanban or a combination, adding SAFe on top of that will just collapse it. So SAFe assumes people are doing Agile and Scrum properly. I'm picking SAFe, but it could be any other of these bigger frameworks, right? So I would say that you probably should do an assessment, see if your teams are doing Agile and Scrum properly first, and then you may just be missing that upper level management alignment for your initiatives. Maybe that's all that's missing. But if your teams can't get Scrum and Kanban down, adding SAFe on top of it, I know that what the industry says is that, well, SAFe will help you be Agile. It really is not correct, right? You got to be good at Agile first, then implement SAFe to help in the initiative alignment at a higher level. So SAFe is really for higher levels to get the visibility into what the Agile teams are doing, especially if you have a large organization with hundreds of teams. So I would start with an assessment of where are your teams today before making that decision.
So you want to really be comfortable in that Agile maturity so that you've got a strong foundation before you scale it out.
Absolutely. And you may find that some teams might need a reboot just because they're just not getting it. And you might have some that are very advanced in that maturity, right? So you'll probably find a mix in your organization. And then from there say, okay, maybe a reboot is enough. And maybe all we need is a simple portfolio management process. And we really don't need to go to the SAFe model unless you're into the hundreds of teams. So again, Jamie, I don't know your level and how many teams you have, but that's what I would do based on your question that I have in front of me.
Perfect. Thanks, Maurizio. Okay, next question. We've got, when you introduced MVP and work in process limits, did this include restructuring their projects into smaller increments of MVP plus a number of releases?
All right. Thanks, Sean, for the question. So the teams were doing so-called MVPs, at least they thought they were. The reality was they were building more of a maximum value rather than a minimum. So when we introduced the MVP, we really reset them. We made them understand an MVP is really a minimum, right? You don't have to build the entire feature. So did we set some WIP limits? So these were Scrum teams. So we encouraged them to start and finish stories before starting on new work. So we didn't introduce a limit. We really tried to coach them in understanding the benefits of finishing a story before starting another one. That's how we went about it with these teams. So we restructured projects into smaller increments. Yes, we did. Absolutely. They had epics that were super epics, uber epics, like we like to call them in the industry. Some epics lasted for months and months and months. So we did restructure them. We did redefine what is an epic. We did put time limits or time boxes on the epics. And we were using in this organization the epic terminology from Scrum, not the SAFe terminology, right? So an epic is just a large user story that can't be finished in a sprint. That's how we defined it for this organization. And then from there, we organized releases, right? So they did release, but they were at the point where they were releasing as we got through the reboot. They were literally releasing sometimes every day. So that's how fast we got them rebooted. Remember, this is a very technical platform. It's not just like a website, right? So the releases were being done. They had continuous integration going as well. We did have to refactor some of the CI and CD that they were doing, but we definitely got them going where you said, Sean. Hopefully I answered your question in a roundabout way.
Prior to the reboot, Maurizio, how often were they releasing? Was that a big objective of theirs to reduce that release cycle time?
So I think it was more, they were releasing, but they weren't releasing stuff of value. So I think it was less focused on, are we hitting our release? It was more where we have a bunch of teams working on stuff, and we just every 2 weeks we're finishing something, and then someone was worrying about the release process. So they were releasing fairly frequently. The question was more, were they releasing valuable stuff? And that's where the reboot helped them to refocus, right? You can keep adding features, but if it's not bringing values to your end users, there's no point. That was the biggest issue that this organization has, is just releasing stuff for the sake of releasing it. So we really helped them realign that, and then releasing quicker came as we helped them focus.
Maybe this question will go along with that, actually. So how do you go about aligning that value between the business teams and the people developing it?
Yeah, so that's great question, right? So really, and again, in this organization, the POs were sort of disconnected from the engineering team, even though they used to use an old PRD approach, so they really didn't understand the agile approach. So we had to sort of reboot how the POs were working, and the POs felt they weren't connected, and so the POs were sort of representing the business, but not really. So really, in rebooting the POs and their approach and what they were responsible for, we ended up realigning them closer to the business. But that actually became as a secondary thing, because first we had to realign the engineering team to understand the agile basics. And so the product side of the organization was a second phase. So in this first phase, all we did is realign the engineering organization to work better. And after the 10-month period, we then worked on realigning the product organization. So that came in the later phase.
Thank you. All right, we got a question from Paul. Would a smaller organization, given the consideration of scale, generally require a shorter time/resource runway than 100 days for planning and executing an agile reboot plan?
Paul, I love your question. Thank you for asking it. So let me tell you it. I'll give the political answer. It depends. You can work with a large organization and get stuff moving very quick. And then you can work with a small organization that gets stuck in analysis paralysis. So I have some customers I've worked with where I literally, we get a call, we sign an SOW with them, and they say, okay, train us, come in, start coaching us. And within, a 3-month period, they've already run 2 sprints in the new rebooted plan. That's a small organization. Then I have another small organization where working with them for many, many months, and we're just now getting to where we're going to start the reboot and start the training. And we're just doing the training now, but it took months to get there because of other things going on. So it really depends on the openness and willingness of the organization to take this on. If you get that C-level that's really bought in and saying, guys, we really need to, rip this Band-Aid and start again because it's just not happening. And you get that C-level commitment where they understand what they're signing up for. This kind of a ride isn't for everyone. If you can imagine yourself up at the top of the roller coaster, this could be a roller coaster ride if you're not ready for it. But that's where, with the proper coaching and if you have the support of the executives, you'll get through it. So it could be shorter than 100 days. Absolutely. It really will depend organization by organization. So hopefully I answered your question, Paul.
Perfect. Thanks, Maurizio. What are some of the gaps that you've seen between senior management and the agile mindset?
Where do I start? that would be a session on its own. So the biggest thing is just the misconceptions on what executives think Agile is. So the biggest misconception of executives is they think they're going to put in Agile and they'll be able to predict exactly when a certain feature is going to be delivered down to the date. That's not why you do Agile. And a lot of people think that's why we do Agile. The reason we do Agile, and this is what executives need to understand, that's where the understanding of why you're doing Agile is sometimes more important than the buy-in. The reason you do Agile is because you're trying as an organization to deal with your ever-changing market that's changed right underneath you, right? We can just look at the last 2 years with COVID. Organizations have had to pivot on a dime, right? So if you're not an Agile organization, how can you now deal with COVID, right? How can you pivot on a dime? And so if the executives think that Agile is about dates, it's not. It's really about being able to respond to market needs and changes in your market. If you're not able to respond quickly, then your competition is going to eat your lunch. And so that's where executives need to get that understanding. And if executives in your organization are not understanding that that's what Agile is about, then they might need some executive coaching. And that's another thing that we do, is provide coaching at the executive level to make them understand what Agile is and is not, and just fix some of those misconceptions. So that's how we go about it.
Perfect. Thank you, Maurizio. Okay, I think we've gotten through all the questions at this point. We can wrap it up then. So the last thing we have today for everyone is a quick draw. So through our random generation, we have 3 gift cards we're going to be sending out to folks. So congratulations to David Kearns, Sean Robson, and Lauren Davidson. So congratulations. Thank you for attending. You guys will be receiving a gift card in your email. And thank you everyone else for attending today. We will be sending this deck out to everybody, and we're going to have a recording of it posted to our YouTube channel as well. So we'll send everybody an update on how to access this, and look forward to future webinars as we continue to bring more discussions around Agile, ITSM, DevOps, and the Atlassian tools. So thank you, Maurizio, and thank you everyone for attending today. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye now.